A young boy vanished without a trace near the river. 7 years later, a local fisherman pulls a strange object from the water, unleashing a chilling secret buried deep beneath the town's surface. What happens next will keep you hooked until the very end. The sun cast a warm golden hue over the sleepy riverside town of Marrow's Bend, the kind of place where nothing truly awful was ever supposed to happen. It was the last day of summer break, and laughter echoed along the winding trail that bordered the slow-moving river. Children played tag between the trees, their bicycles strewn like forgotten toys across the grass, while parents sipped coffee on porches, chatting about school starting the next week. It was a day like any other, until it wasn't. 8-year-old Liam Callahan had always been an explorer at heart. He wasn't afraid of mud, bugs, or even the strange rustling sounds that came from the woods at night. With his shaggy brown hair and a toothy grin missing 2 front teeth, Liam was the kind of boy people smiled at when he rode past on his red bike, a blur of energy and joy. That afternoon, he asked his mom, Claire, if he could ride down to the river trail and play for a bit. She hesitated. There were chores to finish and dinner to prep, but the sun was shining, and the river had always been a haven for children. She kissed the top of his head and told him to be back by 5. She would replay that moment 1,000 times. Liam never came back. When Claire called his name at dinner time and didn't hear the familiar thump of footsteps bounding up the porch, she assumed he'd lost track of time. But 20 minutes later, when his plate went cold and his bike was still gone, the first thin thread of worry pulled tight in her chest. By 6, she was at the river herself, calling his name, heart pounding harder with every unanswered shout. His bike was found lying on its side near the riverbank, one wheel still spinning slowly. One of his sneakers was a few feet away, half buried in the mud. The sheriff arrived within the hour. By nightfall, the townspeople had gathered with flashlights and lanterns. Volunteers formed search lines, combing the woods and the tall grass with calls that grew increasingly desperate. Divers were summoned from the city to search the river, but the waters yielded nothing. Dogs picked up a scent for a few yards before it vanished near the edge of the river, as though the boy had simply dissolved into air. Helicopters circled overhead, spotlights piercing the night, but Liam was gone. For days, the town held its breath. Claire refused to leave the riverbank. She sat on a blanket, eyes fixed on the current, whispering his name into the wind. "He's not gone," she insisted to anyone who tried to comfort her. "He didn't drown. He's out there. I know it." But as days turned into weeks, the rescue turned into a recovery, and the recovery into quiet acceptance. The town mourned as one. The river, once a place of joy, was now silent and heavy, its slow flow a constant reminder of what had been lost. Claire never stopped searching. Every missing person's flyer she posted, every walk she took along that same stretch of river, was a testament to a mother's refusal to let go. And yet, beneath the surface of that dark water, something lingered. The older residents, the ones who had lived by the river all their lives, said little. But some muttered, in voices barely above a whisper, that it wasn't the first time a child had vanished near that part of the river. That once, long ago, before the town even had a name, the river took what it wanted. And it always gave something back, eventually. But no one truly believed those tales anymore. Not in this modern world. Until 7 years later, when something strange rose from the water, and the past refused to stay buried. 7 years is a long time to hold on to hope. Long enough for friends to stop calling, for search parties to dwindle into memory, and for most people to gently insist it's time to move on. But Claire Callahan never did. Not even for a single day. In her heart, the loss of Liam wasn't final. There had been no body, no farewell, no closure. Just an empty place at the table, a quiet bedroom gathering dust, and a river that never answered her cries. After the first year passed, Claire sold her photography business and moved into a modest cottage closer to the river, within walking distance of the place where Liam's bike had been found. Her days were spent in quiet routines, long walks along the bank, hours poring over old case files and maps, and nights spent staring out the window toward the shimmering current. She kept a journal where she recorded every detail, every strange dream, every odd happening near the water. If the river had taken her son, she believed, then surely it held the secret of how to bring him back. Most people in Marrow's Bend pitied her. Some called her obsessed. Others whispered that she'd gone mad. Even the sheriff, once a fierce ally, had stopped returning her calls. "Claire," he had said gently one winter evening, "sometimes the hardest thing we have to do is accept what we can't change." But Claire had heard that line too many times. It felt like poison wrapped in sympathy. Every year on the anniversary of Liam's disappearance, Claire held a vigil by the river. No one came anymore, not since the second year. But she lit candles, read aloud from his favorite storybooks, and placed a single red balloon on the branch of the tree near where his sneaker had been found. She whispered his name into the wind, just as she had that first night. "Liam, I'm still here. I'll always be here." Her home, over time, became a shrine. The walls were lined with photographs. Liam laughing on the swings. Liam blowing out birthday candles. Liam with muddy shoes and grass-stained knees. She had his drawings framed, his toys dusted and neatly arranged. His room remained untouched, the sheets freshly washed, the night light still plugged in beside the bed. Some might have seen it as clinging to ghosts, but for Claire, it was a promise she refused to break. If he came back, even after all these years, he would know he had a place to return to. She scoured forums, wrote to psychics, spoke to spiritual mediums, and even met with river geomancers, people who believed water could hold memories. Most were charlatans, but a few left her with cryptic words that lingered. One woman, draped in scarves and incense smoke, had held Claire's hands and whispered, "The river keeps what it loves." But even the river grows lonely. Claire couldn't explain it, but she felt that truth in her bones. There were nights she'd walk the shore and feel a presence, like someone watching just beyond the tree line. Sometimes she dreamed of Liam, older now, silent, standing by the water, reaching toward her with eyes that looked just the same. She would wake with his name on her lips, heart hammering in her chest. Still, the world moved on. The school Liam would have attended replaced his memorial tree with a bench. The old sheriff retired. New families came to town. But Claire remained, steadfast and alone, a mother bound not by grief, but by an unshakable belief that her son had not vanished, that he had been taken, and that the river was hiding something. Then, on early spring morning, something changed. Claire was walking the riverbank, same as she always did, when she spotted a figure kneeling by the water, a local fisherman she vaguely recognized from town. He had something in his hands, dripping and slick. He turned to her with wide, startled eyes. "You need to see this," he said, voice trembling. "I just pulled it from the water." And in that moment, Claire felt it deep within her. The tide was finally beginning to turn. The air was damp that morning, laced with the fresh scent of thawing earth and river mist. Early spring had begun to coax green shoots from the frozen ground, but the water still ran cold and dark. As always, Jacob Riley had risen before dawn. He was a quiet man, known more for his solitude than his stories. A retired welder and lifelong resident of Marrow's Bend, Jacob had taken to fishing as a way to pass the long, lonesome days since his wife passed away 3 years ago. The river was his church, his company, and his ritual. He often set up camp near the bend, just downriver from where Liam had vanished all those years ago. He remembered the boy's disappearance clearly. Everyone did. The posters, the search teams, the helicopters, and finally, the silence. The river had swallowed the boy without a trace, or so everyone believed. Jacob had never said it aloud, but he never quite trusted that explanation. The river wasn't just water and silt. It had moods, secrets. Sometimes, when he sat in silence for long enough, he thought he could hear it whispering. That morning, as the sun peeked through a layer of gray clouds, Jacob cast his line into the slow current like he always did. He watched it drift, half lost in thought, until something tugged with unusual weight. His first thought was that he'd hooked onto a log or some submerged junk. Marrow's Bend wasn't immune to litter. But when he reeled it in, the object broke the surface with a strange glint, slick with algae and mud. His breath caught. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't tire. It was a box. Not large, maybe the size of a shoe, but old, heavy, and covered in what looked like carvings. Not ordinary carvings, either. Strange symbols worn by time and water. He hauled it onto the bank with effort, the box slamming onto the wet grass beside his feet. It made a metallic clunk, far too solid to be ordinary driftwood. The latch had rusted shut, but something about the box made Jacob hesitate to pry it open. And then he saw it. Along the side, beneath a smear of algae, was something unmistakable, a name scratched into the metal, faint but readable. Liam. His heart skipped. He leaned in, rubbing the grime away with his sleeve, and the full name appeared. Liam Callahan, etched as if by a child's hand. Jacob staggered back, the world tilting for a moment. The name, the date carved beneath it, and the impossible fact that the box was still intact after all these years. Something about it didn't sit right. This wasn't trash. This was meant to be found. Just then, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Claire Callahan standing at the edge of the trees, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the object in his hands. She hadn't said a word, but something in her expression told him she knew. You need to see this, Jacob said, his voice shaking. I just pulled it from the water. Claire stepped forward, her breath catching as she knelt beside him. Her fingers hovered over the box like it was sacred, her eyes wide and unblinking. She traced the name with trembling hands, her voice a whisper. This is his handwriting. Jacob looked at her, stunned. How could it be? I don't know, Claire replied, voice thick with wonder and fear. But it is. Inside the box, something shifted, tapping faintly against the lid. It wasn't empty. Claire met Jacob's gaze, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air around them grew still, as if the river itself were watching. Something had changed. Something had come back, and neither of them would ever be the same again. Claire stared at the box, her fingers trembling inches above the rusted lid. The name, Liam Callahan, scratched onto its surface, was unmistakable. It wasn't just the name that pierced her heart. It was the way it was written. The looping L, the slightly backward, the uneven letters. It was Liam's handwriting. She would know it anywhere. She had spent countless hours looking at his old notebooks, spelling tests, and birthday cards. This was him, and this was recent. The box was cold to the touch, its metal slick with river muck. Claire brushed away more grime, revealing intricate carvings that ran across every edge. Symbols she didn't recognize, flowing together like a forgotten language. Each line felt purposeful. It wasn't graffiti. It was something older, something deeper. Jacob, kneeling beside her, leaned in and muttered, "This isn't just junk. This looks ancient." Claire tried to force the lid open, but it wouldn't budge. The latch was sealed tight with corrosion and time. Jacob, ever prepared, fetched a pocket knife from his fishing tackle. With gentle care, he wedged the blade beneath the edge of the latch and twisted. The rust groaned, flaked, and finally gave way with a sharp snap. A sudden gust of wind rushed over the riverbank, startling them both. It was sharp and cold, like a breath exhaled from the water. For a moment, the trees seemed to shiver, their branches swaying though the rest of the world was still. Claire's pulse thundered in her ears as she slowly opened the box. Inside, cushioned by rotted cloth, lay a collection of items that made her breath catch. First, a small drawing, faded but intact, done in crayon on what looked like school paper. It was unmistakably Liam's style. A crooked house, a stick-figure family, and a little blue river cutting through the page. But what struck Claire was the figure standing alone near the river's edge, drawn in darker colors, its face scribbled out. She turned the drawing over and found her son's signature, and beneath it, the date, 3 years ago. 3 years. But Liam had vanished 7 years ago. Her hands shook as she picked up the second item, a red rubber bracelet from the local library's summer reading program, the same one he had loved. She had thrown his away after his disappearance. Yet here it was, unmarred by time. Claire's breath came fast and shallow, her mind racing. There was no explanation. Nothing logical could bridge this impossible gap. Jacob gently reached in and pulled out the last item, a tightly rolled piece of paper, bound with a thin leather cord. He handed it to Claire, and she hesitated before untying it. The parchment crackled slightly as she unfurled it. It wasn't just a note. It was a message, written in Liam's unmistakable hand. "Mom, I'm okay. I'm not far. Don't forget me. Please don't stop looking. It's not a dream. Follow the river." Claire's heart shattered and surged all at once. Her knees buckled beneath her as she clutched the letter to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. It was real. He was alive. He was alive. Jacob placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, his voice low with disbelief. "Claire, this can't be fake. This changes everything." She nodded slowly, unable to form words. The wind howled again, stronger this time, as if something deep within the river had stirred. Claire rose to her feet, her grief now fused with fierce determination. She looked out over the water, no longer just a place of mourning, but now a path. A map, a message. "I'm going to find him," she whispered. And for the first time in 7 years, she didn't sound like a grieving mother clinging to hope. She sounded like a mother on a mission. The river had given her a sign, and she would follow it, no matter where it led. The river no longer looked the same to Claire. Where once it had been a graveyard of hope, a place she came only in mourning, gazing at the water with empty eyes, it now shimmered with purpose. Every ripple, every glint of sun reflected on its surface seemed to whisper a secret, a trail, a promise. Liam's message pulsed in her pocket, burned into her mind. Follow the river. She returned to the riverbank the next morning, earlier than ever, before the fog had lifted. Jacob was already there, quietly waiting with his tackle box, thermos in hand. He didn't fish that day. He simply nodded as she arrived, as if her presence confirmed what he had already decided. Something extraordinary was happening. Claire brought the box again, wrapped in layers of cloth and sealed in a waterproof bag. She hadn't slept, poring over every item inside, analyzing every word of Liam's note. It was still impossible, still defied reason, but not her heart. Her heart accepted it as truth without hesitation. Because a mother knows her child's handwriting. A mother feels when something is real. They walked the river's edge together, following the curve downstream, past the old willow grove and the rusted remnants of the mill bridge. For hours they searched, examining every rock, every bend, every tree that seemed out of place. And then, just before noon, Claire spotted something that stopped her cold. A symbol carved into the trunk of a tree, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. It matched one of the markings from the box. A curved line intersected with a circle, etched shallowly into the bark, but clearly intentional. She reached out, running her fingers across the grooves. This wasn't here before. Jacob knelt beside it. No way this happened naturally. And if this matches the box? Claire nodded. It means Liam made it, or someone who has him. They continued on, searching more intently now. And soon, they began to see more signs. Another marking, this time on a rock near the water's edge. A third scratched into a flat piece of driftwood lodged in the mud. Each time, Claire's conviction grew. This wasn't just coincidence. It was a path, a breadcrumb trail, left behind by someone trying to be found. And then came the most chilling discovery. Jacob pointed to the opposite bank where the trees grew denser, shadows clinging to the undergrowth. There, tangled in the roots of a fallen tree, something red flapped gently in the breeze. Claire waded into the cold water without hesitation, her boots filling with mud, her legs numb. She pulled it free, a strip of fabric, worn and faded, but unmistakably part of Liam's favorite jacket. The blue and red windbreaker she had begged him to wear every time he played outside. She brought it to her face. It still smelled faintly of pine and dirt. Her knees gave way in the shallows, and for a long moment she just held it to her chest, the world blurring with tears. Jacob helped her to shore, his eyes haunted but calm. "This ain't just some trail of memories," he said quietly. "This is fresh. That jacket hasn't been in the water long." Claire looked at the river again, now less a passive backdrop and more a living thread, tying the present to a mystery that had begun 7 years ago. Every instinct in her screamed that Liam was out there. alive, leaving clues, waiting for her to see them. She clutched the strip of jacket in one hand, the message in her pocket, and looked downriver, where the path curved out of sight into a thick wall of trees. "Wherever this goes," she whispered, "I'm following it to the end." Jacob glanced at the woods, then back at her. "Then I'm coming with you." And so, side by side, they stepped deeper into the unknown, into the trees, the shadows, and the secrets the river had guarded for far too long. Because Liam hadn't been lost. He had been hidden. And now, the river was ready to reveal the truth. The trees swallowed them whole. As Claire and Jacob followed the river deeper into the woods, the light dimmed, filtered through thick canopies of moss-draped branches. The air changed too, cooler, denser, humming with a strange electric tension. The world here felt untouched by time. Even the birds seemed to hush, as if honoring the silence of something ancient and hidden. Claire kept her eyes on the water. The river curved gently ahead, whispering its secrets as it trickled over roots and stones. She had walked this forest path before, years ago, in the early weeks after Liam vanished. But back then it had felt empty. Now it felt alive, and not just in the way nature pulses. There was intention here, a feeling that they were being watched, not in malice, but in quiet expectation, as if something knew they were coming. Jacob walked a few steps behind, eyes scanning the ground, hand never far from the foldable blade clipped to his belt. Though he was quiet, Claire knew he was thinking the same thing she was. We're getting close to something. An hour into the forest, the next sign appeared. Carved into the bark of a massive, gnarled tree was the same symbol from before. Curved line, closed circle. But this time it was larger, deeper. Claire touched it and felt a faint vibration in her fingertips. Not sound, but something more primal, like the memory of sound. Beneath the symbol, a series of horizontal lines were etched in a row. 4 of them, then a space, then 2 more. Jacob squinted at it. Code? Directions? Claire shook her head. "I think it's a countdown." The idea chilled them both. What would it be counting down to? Time? Distance? They didn't know. But with the symbol came more clues. A few yards ahead, nestled between a pair of mossy stones, was another piece of Liam's world. A small, hand-carved wooden boat. Claire gasped as she picked it up, brushing away dirt. She remembered when he'd made one just like it in 2nd grade for a class project. The mast was snapped, but the initials LC were carved on the underside. It wasn't rotted. It wasn't aged. It was recent. "He's leaving us these," she whispered, more to herself than to Jacob. "He wants to be found." The deeper they walked, the more surreal the forest became. Trees grew twisted together into archways, vines swayed without wind, and the river itself narrowed into strange, spiraling channels before widening again. They reached a section where the river flowed into a low clearing ringed with stones. In the center was something that made them both freeze. A circle of children's shoes. Claire knelt slowly, her breath catching in her throat. Tiny shoes, some worn and muddy, others nearly new. Boys and girls, all sizes, arranged with care in a perfect circle. At the very center was a single stone, flat and smooth, with a message scrawled across it in Liam's handwriting. "They're not alone." Claire's heart pounded. This isn't just about Liam. Jacob looked pale. "You think other kids?" She nodded slowly. "He's not the only one. He's telling us that." The implications slammed into her. If Liam had been taken, if he had survived, and if others were with him, then this was bigger than a simple disappearance. This was something planned, something orchestrated, and somehow the river was connected to all of it. The sun dipped lower, casting golden spears of light through the trees. Claire looked ahead. The river forked, one branch flowing sharply left toward a thicket of brambles, the other curving right beneath a natural stone arch. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the box again. Something inside, the compass that had come loose from its cloth lining, began to quiver, its needle spinning before settling firmly in one direction. Toward the right, toward the arch. Claire and Jacob exchanged a glance. "Let's follow it," she said, voice steady with purpose. And with that, they stepped through the arch, deeper into the heart of the river's secret, where the past waited to be unearthed, and where the truth, long buried, was beginning to stir. The stone arch marked more than just a change in direction. It marked a shift in reality. As Claire and Jacob stepped beneath it, the forest transformed around them. The sounds of the river dulled, absorbed by a hush so deep it felt sacred. The trees here were taller, older, their trunks wider than cars, their branches thick with vines and hanging moss. The light was dimmer, tinted green and gold, filtered through leaves that barely stirred. It was as if time had slowed or stopped altogether. Claire felt it immediately. A presence, not threatening, but heavy, ancient, as if they had walked into a place that remembered everything. Jacob noticed it too. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Feels like we're trespassing on something." She nodded. "Something that's been waiting." The path narrowed, hemmed in by towering roots and brambles, and then opened into a hollow, a sunken clearing, naturally shaped like a bowl, where the river pooled quietly. In the center stood an old stone well, nearly covered in ivy. Beside it, to their astonishment, was a rusted lantern that flickered softly with a golden light. Claire approached slowly, her hand instinctively reaching for the box in her bag. As her fingers touched the lid, the lantern's glow flared brighter. A low hum filled the air, like a song with no words, vibrating in their bones. Jacob stared at the well. "You think he's down there?" Claire didn't answer right away. She stepped closer to the edge and peered down. The well wasn't filled with water. It was dry, revealing a stone shaft that descended into darkness. But carved along the inside walls were symbols, dozens of them. Some matched the ones Liam had left. Others were older, more intricate, like they belonged to a forgotten language. And then came the whisper, soft, faint, almost like a breeze, but unmistakable. "Mom." Claire's blood turned to ice. She jerked back, eyes wide, searching Jacob's face for confirmation. He looked pale. I heard it too. They stood frozen, unsure whether to run or descend. But Claire's motherly instincts overruled everything. Fear, logic, even exhaustion. She dropped to her knees beside the well. "Liam," she called out, voice trembling. Silence. Then again, the whisper. "Follow the light." Claire turned to Jacob, who was already pulling a coil of rope from his backpack, one he always kept in case of emergencies. "I'm going down," she said, determination hardening her voice. Jacob shook his head. "You're not going alone." They rigged the rope to a nearby tree and lowered it into the well. Claire gripped it tight, her palms slick with sweat and dirt. As she descended, the air grew colder, damper, and the humming sound deepened. The walls glowed faintly with the lantern's reflection, bouncing off the symbols. She touched one, a spiral within a diamond, and instantly, images flashed through her mind. Children's faces flickering like ghosts, eyes wide with fear and wonder. A dark hallway, a door locked from the outside. Liam's voice crying out for her in the night. Claire gasped, nearly losing her grip. Jacob steadied the rope from above. "You okay?" She nodded, forcing herself to breathe. At the bottom, her feet touched solid ground. She was inside a cavern, carved from stone but strangely warm. The symbols covered every surface. At the far end stood a wooden door, weathered, ancient, but intact. And above it, in Liam's handwriting, carved into the stone, "Almost there, Mom." Tears welled in Claire's eyes. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the words. Jacob called down, "What do you see?" Claire stared at the door, heart pounding. "Oh," she whispered. Behind her, the lantern flickered once, then went out. The sudden darkness was absolute. Claire froze, her hand still resting on the carved message. "Almost there, Mom." Behind her, the faint echo of the extinguished lantern faded, replaced by the steady sound of her own heartbeat. She took a shallow breath. The air was cold and damp, but not foul. It smelled of stone, time, and something faintly floral like lavender left to dry in an attic. "Jacob," she called upward, her voice bouncing off the stone walls. "I'm still here," he shouted down, urgency in his tone. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she replied. "There's a door down here. I think Liam left it." There was silence above for a moment. "Wanting to come down?" "Not yet," Claire said. "Let me see where this leads." She reached in her bag and found the small flashlight she always carried. The beam cut through the dark like a sword, illuminating the symbols around her, now glowing faintly, as if they responded to the light. She took a cautious step forward, her boots echoing softly against the stone floor. The wooden door looked ancient. Its hinges were iron, rusted but strong, and the grain of the wood was etched with more of the mysterious carvings. At its center was a small circular indentation. Claire's eyes widened. She had seen this before. On the inside of the wooden box Liam had sent. She pulled the box out and placed it gently into the indentation. A soft clicking sound echoed in the chamber, like a mechanism waking after years of sleep. The box sank into the wood, and a low hum began to vibrate through the door. Then, slowly, with the groan of centuries, the door opened inward. Claire stepped back as a soft golden light spilled out. Beyond the door lay a vast chamber unlike anything she had ever seen. It was circular, with a domed ceiling covered in bioluminescent moss that glowed in soft blues and greens. Stone pillars lined the walls, each engraved with symbols and images of children, some playing, some reaching upward, others simply standing still, eyes wide and solemn. At the center of the room, encased in what looked like glass or crystal, was a circular platform, and on it, resting gently, were drawings. Dozens of them. Claire stepped closer, heart pounding. The drawings were all done by a child's hand. Crayon and pencil sketches on torn paper, each one telling a piece of story. A boy standing by a river. A group of kids inside a cave. Strange creatures with glowing eyes watching from the trees. A ladder stretching up to the stars. She picked one up and turned it over. Scrawled in Liam's handwriting, "We're still here, but the door only opens if you believe." Claire's hands trembled. She stared at the drawings, absorbing the unspoken plea in every scribbled line. Liam was alive. Not just alive, he had been trying to communicate, to send messages, to leave a trail, not just for her, but for anyone who dared follow. The platform pulsed faintly beneath her, like a heartbeat. She noticed something else now. Along the walls, behind the pillars, were alcoves. Small beds, blankets, books, toys, all arranged with care. This wasn't just a hiding place. It had been a home. Jacob's voice echoed faintly down the well. "Claire, what's happening?" She turned back toward the rope. "There's something down here," she called. "Something big. I think it's where they lived. They, Liam, and others." She turned back to the drawings and noticed a final one resting apart from the rest. It showed a boy, clearly Liam, standing at a fork in the river. One path led to darkness, the other to a spiral of light. Above him, a message, "Don't go alone." Claire's breath caught. Just then, the door behind her began to close with a slow, grinding creak. She ran to it, but it shut before she reached it, sealing her inside. She pressed her hands to the cold surface, panic rising. "Jacob," she screamed. His voice echoed faintly from the other side. "Claire, what happened?" "I'm locked in," she shouted. "But I'm okay. I think Liam planned this. He didn't want me to go alone because what's next? It's not meant for one person." The room seemed to respond to her words. The moss on the ceiling brightened. The drawings fluttered as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. Claire knew what she had to do. She would explore every corner of this chamber. She would uncover every hidden message, every piece of the puzzle. And when she emerged, because she would emerge, she'd bring the truth with her. But deep in her heart, she knew something else now. This wasn't just about saving Liam. It was about saving all of them. The chamber seemed to breathe with her now. The air around Claire had taken on a different weight, no longer cold and uncertain, but heavy with memory. As she moved deeper into the room, her footsteps silent against the stone floor, the bioluminescent moss above pulsed gently, responding to her presence. The drawings on the central platform still fluttered slightly, as though stirred by invisible hands. She felt like she was walking through someone's mind, through their memories, their fears, their hope. She approached the alcoves along the circular wall, each one carved meticulously into the stone, and realized they weren't just sleeping areas. They were personal spaces, shrines. She knelt beside one where a collection of small figurines, a mix of hand-carved animals and worn plastic toys, were arranged around a tattered picture book. The name Eli was etched into the stone above the alcove, and beneath it, a crude drawing of a boy with spiky hair and a wide grin. The next alcove held a different story. A faded pink sweater folded neatly beside a cracked music box that still chimed a lullaby when Claire gently turned the key. A name was scrawled in uneven handwriting above this one, too. Marley. Claire placed her hand on the stone and closed her eyes, trying to imagine what Marley's voice had sounded like, how she had ended up here, far from her family and the world that had surely forgotten her. Alcove after alcove told similar stories. Each one was a thread in a tapestry of lost childhoods, stitched together in the dark beneath the forest. The oldest alcove bore no name, only symbols, twisting spirals and sharp angles carved so deeply they seemed to pulse with energy. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't just marks of identity, but warnings. Something had brought these children here, and something had kept them. In the center of the chamber, opposite the entrance, stood a wall covered in more drawings, larger this time, stretching from floor to ceiling. Unlike the others, these were darker. They showed scenes of fear, shadowy figures lurking in the trees, children running, a river that twisted like a serpent through the woods. One image made Claire stop breathing. It was of a tunnel, just like the one she had entered, with a red X drawn over it. Beneath it were the words, written in Liam's unmistakable hand, "Too late to turn back." Claire backed away, her heart pounding. Then something moved. She spun around, flashlight cutting through the dim glow, but saw no one. Yet the sensation persisted. Someone watching her, someone just out of sight. Her fingers tightened around the flashlight. "Liam," she whispered. No answer. Then came a sound, soft and shuffling like bare feet on stone. It came from one of the darker recesses behind the chamber, a narrow hallway Claire hadn't noticed before. Against all fear, she followed. The passage narrowed, curving deeper into the rock, until it opened into a much smaller room. Inside, the walls were smooth, polished, and completely bare except for a single stone pedestal in the center. Resting atop the pedestal was a stack of journals, thin, handmade, bound with string and filled with pages of crayon drawings and careful, slanted handwriting. Claire picked one up and flipped through it. The entries were dated. Some pages had simple updates, "Today we ate berries," or "The river flooded again." But others sent chills down her spine. "They're still looking for a way to make us forget. I think they took Eli. He wouldn't stop talking about the surface. Something watches us at night. It doesn't blink." Claire set the journal down with trembling hands. This wasn't just a refuge. It had been a prison. These children had recorded everything, as best they could, hoping that one day, someone would find it. Someone like her. Behind her, the shuffling came again. She turned slowly, and there, just beyond the entrance, stood a figure. Small, thin, dressed in tattered clothes. And unmistakably, impossibly, it was Liam. His face was pale, older than she remembered, but unmistakable. His eyes were wide, glistening. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, without a word, he ran into her arms. Claire dropped to her knees, wrapping him in an embrace that shook with sobs she hadn't known she was holding in for 7 years. Liam clung to her, trembling. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. "I left the messages. I kept them safe." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "You're alive. You're safe." He shook his head slowly. "We're not safe yet. Not all of us. You found me, Mom, but now you have to help me find them too." And Claire understood. This wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning. Claire held Liam tightly, feeling the weight of his small frame trembling against her. The reunion was bittersweet, joy mingled with fear. She knew that although she had found Liam, the nightmare was far from over. His whispered words echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder that others were still trapped somewhere beneath the earth. The dim light of the chamber flickered softly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the walls, as if the darkness itself was listening. Liam's voice was fragile but urgent. "There are more of us down here, Mom. Some never made it to the tunnels you found. They're deeper, hidden where no one would ever think to look. They're scared, some don't even know I'm alive." Claire's heart clenched. She had to be strong. For Liam, for those children, and for herself. "Show me," she whispered, eyes searching his. He nodded and took her hand, leading her toward the passageway he'd come from. As they moved through the narrow corridor, the walls grew colder and the air thicker, laden with the scent of earth and forgotten years. The faint glow of the moss faded, replaced by the faint, ghostly shimmer of phosphorescent fungi clinging to damp stones. Claire's flashlight barely pierced the gloom, but Liam's steps were sure and steady. After a few minutes, they reached a heavy iron grate embedded in the floor. Liam knelt and pressed a series of symbols on the surface, symbols Claire recognized from the drawings and journals. With a grinding sound, the grate slowly lifted, revealing a dark staircase spiraling downward. The steps were uneven and slick, carved directly from the bedrock. Below, a cold draft whispered upward, carrying distant sounds, soft voices, muffled sobs, quiet laughter. Liam glanced up at Claire, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. This is where they're hiding. The children who never found a way out. Descent into the depths felt like stepping back in time. The air grew thick, stale, and colder still. The narrow tunnel opened into a vast cavern, one lit by flickering lanterns hung from rough wooden beams. Claire's eyes adjusted to the dim glow and slowly took in the scene before her. Children of all ages, pale and weary, looked up as Liam and Claire appeared at the entrance. Some huddled in small groups, clutching one another for comfort. Others sat alone, tracing fingers over worn toys or scribbling in battered notebooks. The expressions on their faces told stories of hardship, fear, and loss, but also of resilience and flickering hope. Claire's voice caught in her throat as a little girl with tangled hair stepped forward and reached out a trembling hand to Liam. "Is it really you?" she whispered. Liam smiled faintly, kneeling down to hug her. "Yes, it's me, and we're going home." Claire moved through the cavern, greeting each child, listening to their stories. They told her of the shadowy figures that watched them from the forest above, of the secret tunnels and hidden chambers that served as both sanctuary and prison. They spoke of hunger and cold, of whispered prayers for rescue, and of the strange symbols Liam had carved to mark safe paths. As Claire listened, she felt the weight of the past pressing down, but also the strength of a community forged in adversity. These children had survived together, bonded by a shared will to endure. And now, with Liam's return and her presence, that bond would become their greatest hope. Determined, Claire promised to find a way to bring them all back to the surface. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. The path to freedom was fraught with dangers, both seen and unseen. Shadows lurked not only in the dark corners of the caves, but also in the hearts of those who wished to keep these children hidden forever. With Liam by her side and the children looking to her for guidance, Claire steeled herself for the trials ahead. She understood now that her journey was not just to rescue her son, but to unravel a mystery that stretched beyond the forest, beyond the river, and into the darkest corners of humanity. As they prepared to move forward, the cavern filled with a quiet determination. The children, once lost beneath the stone, were ready to reclaim their lives. And Claire, a mother reunited and renewed, was ready to lead them home. Claire stood at the edge of the cavern, surrounded by the weary faces of children who had lived in darkness too long. Yet, despite their resilience, a cold unease settled deep inside her. She had seen hints of something sinister, those shadowy figures in the drawings, the whispered warnings in the journals, the lurking feeling of unseen eyes watching her every move. Now, she was determined to uncover who, or what, had orchestrated this nightmare. She and Liam began piecing together the fragments of their past. The children spoke in hushed tones about the Watchers, mysterious figures who appeared periodically above and below ground. They weren't just people. They seemed to carry an aura of menace and power that kept everyone fearful and obedient. These watchers enforced the silence, ensuring no child escaped or sent messages to the outside world. Claire's mind raced. Could these watchers be connected to the river incident years ago? The vanished children, the unexplained disappearances, the townspeople's silence? It was as if an entire conspiracy had swallowed these lives and hid them beneath the earth. To learn more, Claire decided to explore the tunnels where the watchers were last seen. With Liam and a few brave children, she ventured deeper into the labyrinthine passages. The walls here were damp and covered in strange symbols, cryptic signs etched in stone and wood, some glowing faintly under Claire's flashlight. She recognized them from the journals as warnings, marks of territory claimed by the watchers. As they moved cautiously, the oppressive silence was broken only by their soft footsteps and distant dripping water. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed from deeper within the tunnels. Claire froze, heart pounding. The voice was too faint to understand, but unmistakably human, pleading, warning, begging. Liam urged the group forward. "We're close," he said. "They're near." Rounding a corner, they came upon a small chamber lit by flickering lantern light. Inside stood several figures cloaked in dark garments, faces obscured by masks that resembled twisted animal skulls. They exuded an aura of cold authority, their presence commanding and terrifying. Claire's breath caught. These were the watchers. One stepped forward, voice low and chilling. "You should not have come. The children belong here now. Outside, they would be lost. The world is cruel." Claire shook her head, fierce and unyielding. "They belong with their families. You've stolen their lives, hidden them away. This ends now." The watchers exchanged glances, the tension thickening like a storm about to break. Suddenly, the chamber door slammed, shut behind Claire and her group, trapping them inside. The leader advanced. "We protect them from themselves, from the dangers they cannot see. You don't understand what lies beyond." Claire's resolve hardened. "I understand enough. These children deserve freedom, love, and a chance at life, not captivity and shadows." The watchers hesitated, caught between centuries-old traditions and the fierce will of a mother who would stop at nothing to save her son and the others. In that moment, Claire realized the battle was not just for the children's bodies, but for their very souls, and for the truth buried beneath years of silence and fear. Claire's heart hammered in her chest as the heavy chamber door slammed, shut behind her and the watchers. Their masked faces unreadable, closed the space between them and the children. The cold air of the underground cavern was thick with tension. Yet despite the palpable danger, Claire's resolve burned brighter than ever. She was a mother who had waited 7 years to find her son, and now she was determined to break every chain that bound not only Liam, but all these children, trapped in the shadows. The leader of the Watchers stepped forward, his voice low and unwavering. "You don't understand the world outside, Claire. You speak of freedom, but the surface is a cruel place. Here, these children are safe." Claire's eyes blazed. "Safe? You call hiding them away, cutting them off from their families and futures safe? You've stolen their childhoods, their lives. I won't let you keep doing this." Behind her, Liam's small hand gripped hers tightly, his eyes full of both fear and hope. Claire drew strength from that fragile connection. She took a deep breath and spoke clearly, with the calm power of a woman who had borne unimaginable loss and was now ready to fight for justice. "You might have kept them here for years, but you won't hold them anymore. I'll find a way out. I'll get help." A tense silence followed, the Watchers exchanging glances, their dark eyes glinting behind the masks. The leader's voice softened, almost with sadness. "We only wanted to protect them from dangers they could not see. The surface world is not kind. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for a change." Suddenly, one of the younger Watchers stepped forward, pulling off his mask to reveal a face marked by regret and years of hardship. "We never meant for this to last so long. We were trying to shield them, but fear turned to control." With this confession, the atmosphere shifted. Claire sensed the beginning of a fragile truce. She saw the human side behind the shadows, people broken by circumstance, clinging to misguided protection. Using this moment, Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the journals the children had kept. She showed them the pages filled with drawings, messages, and pleas for rescue. They've lived in darkness and silence. They need the world, the light, their families. They're ready. The watchers looked at the journals, the weight of years pressing down on them. The leader nodded slowly. If you promise to protect them, to keep them safe, we will help you bring them out. Relief washed over Claire, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead, navigating the labyrinth to lead the children to freedom without alerting others who might wish to keep them captive. She gathered the children close, their faces hopeful but scared. Together, with reluctant but willing watchers, Claire began planning the escape, their chance to break the chains that had bound them beneath the earth for so long. The journey would be perilous, but for the first time in years, hope burned fiercely in the underground darkness. The air was thick with anticipation as Claire, Liam, and a group of children prepared to leave the cavern that had been their prison for so long. The watchers who had once enforced silence and fear now moved alongside them, guiding the way through the tangled network of tunnels toward the surface. Claire's heart raced, not only with hope, but with the weight of responsibility to keep these fragile lives safe. The children clung to each other, some clutching warm blankets or makeshift toys, their eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. Liam stayed close to Claire, drawing strength from her steady presence. The path ahead was fraught with danger, narrow passages that threatened to collapse, waterlogged chambers, and the ever-present risk of being discovered by those who wished to keep this secret buried forever. As they moved deeper into the labyrinth, the watchers explained the safest routes, warning of traps and hidden pitfalls placed long ago to deter escape. Claire's mind raced, calculating how best to navigate these dangers while keeping the children calm and focused. Suddenly, a distant rumble echoed through the tunnels, a warning of an approaching storm that could flood the underground passages. Panic threatened to rise among the children, but Claire's voice cut through the fear. We must keep moving. We're almost there. Together, we can make it. With renewed determination, they pressed forward, the sound of rushing water growing louder. The path narrowed until they reached a steep incline leading toward an old, rusted hatch near the riverbank, their final barrier between darkness and light. But just as Claire reached for the hatch, a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind them. A figure, masked and armed, stepped into the flickering light. You won't leave here, the watcher growled, a desperate attempt to maintain control. Claire's heart pounded, but she stood firm. It's over. The children are free. The watcher lunged, but Liam stepped between them, his small voice clear and brave. No more hiding. No more fear. The tension shattered like glass. Other watchers, torn between old loyalties and the hope for a better future, intervened, pulling the aggressor back. Claire seized the moment, lifting the hatch and leading the children through the narrow opening. As they emerged into the cool night air, the river's roar filled their ears and the stars sparkled overhead, a world waiting to welcome them home. Tears streamed down Claire's face as she looked at the children, their faces illuminated by moonlight and freedom. The journey wasn't over, but the first step had been taken. Together, they had broken the chains that bound them and reclaimed their chance at life. Emerging from the narrow hatch, Claire blinked against the cool night air as it washed over her face. The river's steady murmur accompanied the distant sounds of the town, faint but unmistakable, a reminder of the world they had been missing for so long. One by one, the children followed, eyes wide with wonder and disbelief as they stepped into moonlight for the first time in years. Their faces were pale, streaked with dirt and tears, but illuminated by the fragile hope of freedom. Claire kept Liam close, feeling his small hand trembling in hers. Around them, the watchers who had helped their escape melted back into the shadows, their mission complete. Claire's gaze scanned the horizon, knowing the journey ahead was only just beginning. The children were no longer prisoners, but they were also lost in a world that had moved on without them. The group made their way quietly toward the edge of the town, careful not to draw attention. Claire's mind raced with questions. How would the community respond? Would anyone believe their story? Were there more dangers lurking above ground, waiting to capture them again? Despite the uncertainty, the overwhelming need was clear. They had to find safety and answers. At the town's edge, Claire spotted a flickering light in a small cabin. With cautious hope, she approached and knocked gently. The door opened to reveal a kind-faced woman, eyes wide with surprise. Claire's voice trembled as she spoke. "Please, these children, they've been lost, trapped underground for years. We need help." Word spread quickly. Soon, the townspeople gathered, their faces etched with shock and disbelief as the children were slowly introduced. Mothers gasped, fathers wiped tears from their eyes, and the community embraced the miracle that had returned from the river's shadow. Claire watched as Liam reunited with his own mother, the joy and sorrow mingling in a silent embrace. But as happy as the moment was, Claire knew many questions remained unanswered. Who was behind the disappearances? Why had the Watchers existed? And how could they ensure no child was ever lost to darkness again? Despite the relief, a new determination grew inside Claire. She vowed to fight not only for the children's healing, but for justice, for truth, and for a future where no family would suffer such a loss. As dawn broke over the river, casting golden light on the reunited families, Claire felt a spark of hope ignite. Hope that the darkest chapters were finally closing and that healing could begin. In the days that followed the miraculous return of the children, the once quiet riverside town transformed into a hub of activity, emotion, and rising questions. News of their escape spread rapidly, drawing media attention, law enforcement officials, and psychologists to the area. People from neighboring towns poured in with curiosity and concern, trying to piece together what had really happened beneath their feet all those years. Claire found herself at the center of it all. Though exhausted and emotionally frayed, she remained steady. Her connection to the children, her role in their rescue, and her unwavering determination made her both a guide and a guardian. Officials interviewed her endlessly, and every detail she gave painted a haunting portrait of the secret society of Watchers who had hidden the children away, not out of malice, but from a deeply misguided need to shield them from the cruelties of the outside world. Some townspeople struggled to comprehend what they heard. The Watchers had lived among them unnoticed, moving like shadows. They had once been respected elders, recluses, and quiet citizens who vanished from the public eye over time. Slowly, the truth began to surface. Decades ago, a traumatic incident involving a child had shaken the town to its core, a tragedy so profound that it fractured the hearts and minds of those closest to it. In their grief, a small group formed with the belief that protecting children meant hiding them away from society itself. That group became the Watchers. Claire discovered faded records, handwritten journals, and old maps stored in forgotten corners of the town library. Proof of the Watchers' transformation from grieving guardians to captors. Their fear of loss had become obsession. Their desire to protect had twisted into control. But not all the Watchers had agreed with what their group had become. Some had tried to leave. Some had tried to expose the truth. They had failed, silenced, shunned. And now, with the escape of the children, the Watchers' long-kept secret had shattered. Still, not everyone believed Claire. Some insisted she was exaggerating. Others accused her of fabricating the entire story for attention. But Claire stood firm, supported by the children, especially Liam, and the growing body of evidence. As more of the children spoke out, recalling memories of tunnels, whispers in the dark, and hidden rituals, the town began to awaken from its slumber of denial. Therapists and child welfare experts were brought in to help the survivors heal. Families struggled to reconnect, rebuilding trust and understanding after years of absence. Claire made it her mission to ensure each child received proper care, education, and most of all, a voice. But amid the progress, a chilling discovery was made. Deep in one of the collapsed tunnels, searchers found a sealed room. Inside were old files, photographs, and surveillance records of other children, some never found, some whose names were not even known. The implication was terrifying. The network may have extended farther than their town. And worse, someone, possibly many, had helped maintain in silence. Claire realized this wasn't just about the children who had been returned. It was about uncovering a hidden system that could still be operating in other places, far from the light. This awakening, though painful, marked a turning point. The town could no longer look away. It had a responsibility now to protect, to heal, and to remember. Claire felt the burden heavy on her shoulders, but she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. A movement had begun, and it started with truth. As the early weeks turned into months, the town stood at a crossroads, caught between the relief of having its children back and the horror of realizing how deeply the roots of the Watchers had stretched beneath their feet. The surface had only been scratched. Claire, ever resolute, refused to let the momentum fade. Too many questions remained unanswered. Too many shadows still loomed over the town's history. With a growing team of investigators, social workers, and volunteers, Claire began to dig deeper. She compiled names from old journals, compared handwriting across decades-old letters, and connected archival records to forgotten town meetings and property deeds. The sealed room had opened a portal into the past, and what it revealed was staggering. The Watchers had been more than a secretive cult. They had operated with disturbing precision, hiding behind the faces of once trusted figures, a former school principal, a retired sheriff, a doctor, and even a church elder. These weren't monsters from distant places. They were neighbors, family. The very people who had been sworn to protect the town's children had betrayed them. Claire didn't hesitate. She took the evidence to the district attorney. Some of the perpetrators were dead. Others, now frail and aged, still lived within the community, hiding in plain sight. Arrests followed. News outlets descended on the town. Faces that had once smiled in holiday photos or presided over school board meetings were now shown in mugshots, accused of crimes spanning decades: abduction, psychological abuse, unlawful detainment. But confronting the past came at a cost. Some townspeople pushed back. They were good people, one resident insisted. They believed they were doing the right thing. Another added, "You're tearing this town apart." Claire faced threats, scorn, even vandalism. Her tires were slashed. Anonymous letters warned her to stop digging. Yet she stood firm. She knew the children deserved truth and justice, not silence. At the same time, survivors from other places began to reach out. Claire's work had spread far beyond their river town. People who had once thought their experiences were isolated now found strength in her voice. Emails poured in. Anonymous tips arrived. One letter stood out. It came from a man in a neighboring state who described a childhood eerily similar to the children Claire had helped rescue. He remembered tunnels, songs sung in the dark, a girl named Eliza, who had vanished before he escaped. The implications sent a chill down Claire's spine. If there were others, if this wasn't an isolated chapter, then the fight had just begun. To help the children process the past, Claire organized group therapy sessions. There they spoke of their memories, some in whispers, some in sobs. Liam, once quiet and withdrawn, now helped the younger kids speak up, reminding them that their voices mattered. Confronting the past was painful, but it was also freeing. No longer bound by secrecy or shame, the children began to reclaim their stories. Parents listened. The town started a memorial garden near the riverbank, where names of missing and rescued children were etched into stone, surrounded by blooms of hope. And at the heart of it all stood Claire, unwavering, knowing that light must be shined on even the darkest places. The past could not be changed, but it could be confronted. And by doing so, the future could be rebuilt on truth. The wind off the river was crisp, brushing through the tall grass of the new memorial garden where Claire now stood, watching the sunrise bleed gold into the morning sky. Just months ago, this same town had been shrouded in silence, burdened by secrets that had festered in its soil for decades. Now, the silence was gone, replaced by the sounds of rebuilding, healing, and hope. The transformation was not just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, communal. Streets once marked by whispers and suspicion now bore murals painted by the children themselves. Colorful images of rivers flowing into light, of children reaching upward, of trees with open hands for branches. What had begun as a rescue mission had blossomed into a movement. The town had decided to start over, not by forgetting the past, but by honoring it, learning from it, and ensuring it could never be repeated. Claire had become more than a voice for the voiceless. She had become a leader, an advocate, and, to many of the children, a second mother. She worked closely with local officials to establish a foundation called the Watchlight Project, dedicated to supporting survivors of underground captivity, exposing hidden abuse networks, and training communities to recognize and respond to signs of institutional secrecy. The name was chosen by Liam himself, because we need people who keep watch, he had said, but this time, people who protect with light, not shadows. The foundation grew quickly, funded by donations from across the country. Former victims and advocates from other towns joined Claire, sharing their stories, launching hotlines, creating resource centers. A small satellite office opened in a nearby city. Then another, then more. What started on the riverbank had rippled outward like stones cast into still water. But even as the momentum carried forward, Claire never lost sight of the children she had first fought for. Each week, she hosted story circles, where the rescued kids gathered to read, write, and talk about their dreams. They painted hope on canvases. They planted trees. Some began speaking at schools, sharing what they had endured, not to frighten others, but to show resilience, to prove that even after being buried in darkness, light could return. Claire's relationship with Liam deepened. Though he had now reunited with his mother, Sarah, they visited often, and Liam never stopped calling Claire Miss Claire with a quiet reverence in his voice. He still had nightmares sometimes, and Claire always answered his late-night calls, whispering gently until his breathing slowed. One evening, a town-wide gathering was held at the community center. Families, survivors, teachers, officers, and townsfolk packed the hall, candles in hand, honoring not only those who were saved, but also those who were still missing. Claire stood at the podium, her heart full, her voice steady. "We were broken once," she said, "but we are not broken now. We are a town that faced its darkest truths and chose not to look away. And because we chose to look, because we chose to fight for our children, we found not just the lost, we found ourselves." The crowd erupted in applause, tears streaming down cheeks, hearts opened and bound together by shared pain and newfound strength. As the candles flickered and the night deepened, Claire looked around at the faces, familiar, beloved, and brave, and knew the river had carried them far. But it was not the river that had saved them. It was courage, truth, love, and a refusal to let the past define them. The town had a new beginning, and this time, it would be written in light. The late summer sun hung low on the horizon, casting warm golden rays over the river that had once swallowed a little boy's name. Now, the water shimmered with peace, its current gentle, no longer holding secrets beneath its surface. Claire sat on a bench near the memorial garden, watching Liam toss pebbles into the shallows, his laughter ringing freely through the air. Each stone he cast seemed to carry away the last of the darkness, each ripple a testament to how far they had come. The town was quieter these days, but in the best way, no longer silenced by fear but calm with healing. The Watchlight Project had grown beyond anything Claire had ever imagined. Stories poured in from across the country, from people who had been trapped, silenced, hidden, and who now found their voices because someone had dared to speak first. Claire had become a reluctant public figure, speaking at conferences, meeting with lawmakers, helping implement new child safety protocols in schools and social services. But through it all, she remained rooted here, in the town where it began, in the place where a boy vanished and then returned, and with him, the truth. It was on one of these quiet days, months after the final arrest had been made, that the last thread of the story finally came to light. A local construction crew, rebuilding part of the river's western bank for a new public walkway, stumbled upon a rusted metal box buried deep in the mud, tucked between roots that had twisted like claws. Inside, beneath years of decay, they found records, photographs, names, symbols matching those found in the sealed chamber. There was one photo in particular that struck Claire when it was shown to her. A small girl with long dark hair and a stuffed rabbit in her arms. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, was a single name, Eliza. Claire froze. That name. It had been mentioned once in a whispered conversation with a survivor from another state. A girl who had vanished before he escaped. A girl he had mourned, believing she had never made it out. Claire acted quickly. Through Watchlight's national network, she contacted the man. His voice trembled when she described the photo. "That's her," he whispered. "That's Eliza. She was real." In the weeks that followed, an extraordinary truth unfolded. Eliza had survived. After a failed transfer between facilities, she had been found as a toddler in a neighboring town, raised by a foster family who never knew her true origins. She had no memory of what had happened before the age of 4. But thanks to DNA testing, the connection was made. The man who had mourned her was not just a fellow survivor. He was her older brother. Their reunion was quiet, emotional, powerful. Claire stood nearby as they embraced for the first time in decades. Eliza wept in his arms. "I always wondered why I was scared of the dark," she said, "even when nothing bad had ever happened to me." Now she knew. Now she could begin to heal. That final piece, Eliza's rediscovery, felt like the last echo of the past finally returning home. With it came closure, not just for the brother, not just for Claire, but for the town itself. The Watchers were gone. The tunnels had been filled. The shadows no longer whispered. In their place stood monuments, murals, and children playing by the river without fear. That evening, as the town gathered once more, this time for a celebration, Claire stood at the edge of the water beside Liam, Eliza, and her brother. Fireflies danced in the air. Music floated from the park, and one by one, lanterns were lit and released into the sky, tiny glowing orbs of hope rising into the night. As Claire watched them ascend, she felt something lift from her chest, an invisible weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying since the day she saw that first strange object pulled from the river. A boy's toy, a boy's memory, a boy's call for help. Now he was free. They all were. Claire smiled, took Liam's hand, and whispered, "We made it." And in that moment, under a sky full of light, the story finally came to an end, not with fear or loss, but with love, justice, and the promise of a tomorrow that no longer hid in the dark. Thank you for joining this journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that honor the strength of the human spirit. Some stories begin with a whisper and end with a roar. Others begin with silence and end with light. This was a story that started with a boy who vanished near a river, but it became so much more. It became a story of courage born from heartbreak, of truth clawing its way through years of lies, of a town that dared to face its darkest shadows and, in doing so, discovered its brightest light. We followed Claire, a woman who could have turned away, but chose instead to dig deeper, to ask the questions no one else would, and to stand firm when the ground beneath her began to shake. We witnessed Liam's quiet bravery, a child who endured the unimaginable and still found laughter again. And we watched as one community, once paralyzed by secrets, came together to heal, to grow, and to protect the innocent. This is not just a tale of mystery or suspense. It's a reminder that truth is never truly buried, and that love, persistence, and hope will always find a way through even the darkest tunnels. Thank you for watching and staying with us until the very end. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel, reflect, or believe in the power of resilience, we invite you to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful, and unforgettable stories. Because some stories need to be told, and others, like this one, need to be remembered. Subscribe now. Your support helps keep the light shining.